Hey there, tourists. Welcome inside Old House. We're your guides, Skye and Sandy, and today we'll be talking about document A01, property, and the ARG. Just a disclaimer, please don't listen to episodes until you have finished reading the book. All episodes will contain spoilers from the novel We Used to Live Here, along with the short stories related to Pig KEU, the Poltergeist Expanded Universe.
Just a few things that I wanted to touch on from the last episode. I did forget to mention there was one more fire. Officer Kieran actually tells Emma in the bloodbath document on page 287 that the A-frame cabin has also been burned to a crisp. And we do mention this in our first episode, but when I was going over the fires last episode, I did forget to mention it, so I just wanted to bring that up again. And then there was also one confirmed remaining anagram in the names Skyler Goodhill and Lewis Rue. OHA has actually confirmed if you put them together, we'll get more interesting options. So to date, when we're recording this, we still haven't figured it out, but that is an anagram somewhere in there. And we still don't know if we're using all the letters or not, but good luck.
Sorry, I didn't realize that OHA had confirmed when we put them together. Was that... Reddit is not giving me updates.
I also sent it to you. I took a screenshot and sent it to you, but you might have just not realized what I was sending you. They actually replied on the Reddit and it said, "Oh, we're struggling with this too, and we found that if you put these two together, there's more words that you can find," or something like that.
Was that before or after I pointed out you can make Old House and tourists out of that?
I think it was after.
Gosh darn it, I'm so sorry I missed that. I need to figure out Reddit because I'm missing so much because I don't think to look at it unless I get a notification.
I know, and so that's the thing, even if you've commented previously on that post, you don't necessarily get notified, and so you're constantly having to be on there. I just happened to look again, honestly. I don't know why. I think I was trying to fiddle around with Skyler Goodhill and what I could make, and that's what came up, so...
Starting off with the first document, property, just a quick synopsis of it. A01 property is a real estate listing for Eve's house. It gives us some insight into dimensions and specifics about the house and the surrounding area. It's also our first clue, actually, to the book being part of an alternate reality game, also commonly known as ARGs or ARGs. And today we'll be taking a look at the document first and then break down what an ARG is and where we all are currently with solving it. So property is 2 pages long, but there is a lot hidden in that document.
This seems to be a trend.
That's true. Every chapter is loaded with hidden stuff. On the Kindle version, it is page 8. And I forgot to grab my book to double check what page it is in the actual book. But it is
page
right after
9.
Page 9. I was close then. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Page 9. Thank you. And this is actually the first official document we are introduced to. And I would say our first real introduction to the house itself, which I can actually say with a bit more confidence now, because during the Instagram Ask Me Anything in November, the question, is the blueprint of the house plans in the map the first floor of Eve's house or another old house? To which Marcus replied, "I will say it's part of old house, whatever old house really is, that is distinct from Eve's house. Probably." With that 98% confirmation of the blueprint not being Eve's house, 98% because nothing is certain in old house actually, property is the first time we have a solid look at Eve's house. The first chapter doesn't talk about it actually all that much, other than the fact it has a foyer on page 4. And I'm a little bit embarrassed to say that I missed this description the first 7 or so times I read this chapter, but it bluntly says old house in the first chapter, actually.
Yeah, it does.
At the end of page 6. I didn't notice the double entendre until I was figuring out what to talk about in this episode, but there's always something new to find out when reading this book.
Absolutely.
The document starts off with the description that the listing is for 3709 Heritage Lane. And already we actually need to pause to point out some foreshadowing. Mm-hmm. Sandy talked about in the last episode about how colors are an important reoccurring theme throughout the book. And I'm here to add that odd numbers are also a thing to keep track of, particularly the numbers 3, 5, 7, and 9, each of which is in the property document. And before I shoot some statistics at you, some things I want you guys to be aware of. The first is we do not include any instances both of colors and of numbers written in the acknowledgments in these statistics unless we are absolutely sure they are related to either the story or the ARG. Like a example of this is when I was looking at the word green, someone's last name is Green in the acknowledgments, and it was counting that towards how many times green was mentioned in the book. So we just kind of take anything in the acknowledgments out. We also do not count instances of numbers, such as reply number 5. However, we have included instances where a number is mentioned in a made-up citation. We may be an instance or 3 off of our numbers. We rely on the Kindle's version's ability to search how many times something is written. And Kindle does pretty well actually with the searches, but it particularly, at least for me, did not like finding numbers that are attached to other numbers, such as searching for the number 7 didn't bring up Eve's address 3709 at all, despite having the number 7 in it. And eventually I intend to reread the book again to find exact numbers someday, but I haven't actually had time to reread it that intent in mind. So the following numbers are as close as we can get right now to having exact numbers of numbers.
I did go through the book, and my digital version does come up with all those individual numbers. Like, say, for example, in 2017, it would pull up for 7. However, still, these numbers may be off because I think I did it really quickly, and there still may be some things that we want to not include in these numbers, and we may disregard later on once we take a closer look. But for now, these are very rough numbers.
As we pointed out earlier, there are a lot of numbers in this book.
Yeah.
So starting with the number 3, in its numerical form, it shows up 46 times in the book, and in its written form, 58 times. We were not kidding when we said there was a lot of numbers. 3 kids, 3 quote-unquote mints fall into Thomas's hands. Eve calls Thomas's name 3 times in the basement. Even Marcus has a 3-book deal, according to the acknowledgments. The number 5 doesn't show up quite as much, with 20 times in its numerical form and 20 times in its written form. It's just as important as a number, however. A family of 5 hikers going missing, a 5-kilometer area around Old House, a 5-part miniseries about Emma. I was trying to mix up Emma and Eve into one word. Emma murdering Paige in the last chapter, and many important moments in the book include the number 5. The number 7 shows up 43 times in numerical form, 2 of which are the numbers in Heather's address 3707, and 17 times in written form. Jenny is 7 years old. Eve was 7 years old when she lost Mo. Eve was silent for 7 seconds, which is very specific, before panicking about the lost Mo. And Andrew was silent for 7 seconds in his interview, are just a few examples. The number 9 shows up 30 times in its numerical form and 4 times in written form. Andrew and Peter broke into Old House at 9:30 p.m., and Eve paid $9.57 for gas, or just a couple of examples of that. There's also a lot of combination of odd numbers happening, even more so than the single instances. Most of the specific times of events, such as the AMIF tapes disappearing at 3:17 a.m., or it was 7:39 p.m. when Emma sat down with her quote-unquote brother's family for dinner. Alice stabbed Thomas 37 times. There are 57 species of non-native flora and fauna around Old House, and honestly, even every single chapter starts on an odd number.
That's true.
Yeah, I loved that little detail.
And it's purposeful too, because he leaves the page blank for every chapter to start on an odd number. So you're right. Something's with these odd numbers.
As we go through the chapters, documents, and ARG in the future, we will stop and point out any numbers that seem important, but those are the basics of the importance of odd numbers for now. The description of the document actually mentions that the document was originally a listing of 3709 on a real estate website called www.seekinghome.net, and mentions that the website is no longer operational. which is actually not true, but we will get to that in a bit. The description mentions that a bank may have owned the house, but the name of the bank is actually redacted. Sandy, what do you think about the bank?
I'm torn about this one. At first thought, I think the bank probably had nothing to do with it. Maybe they knew it was haunted, maybe they didn't. Either way, they probably just wanted to sell it. And who knows how long the bank had ownership of it or how long ago the house was abandoned. But then, ignoring Occam's razor, my mind automatically goes to, well, if it's specifically mentioned, then maybe it actually means something, when in reality, it could just be nothing. And it's just something Mark has added to like create or like to make the story longer, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the bank is really interesting. I think like he could have made up any name, but he chose to go with redacted. Although, to be fair, if he made up a name, we would probably be like poring over it, trying to find anagrams, trying to figure out if it was related to something. Every word we obsess over.
It's much better that he just said redacted.
Probably.
One less thing for us to obsess about.
So after the synopsis, the listing of the house is titled, "Home is Our Sanctuary. Make this one yours."
Yeah, it's interesting because later on in the document C19 interrogation on page 204, there is narration trying to describe the theories of Old House. Some say it's a sanctuary for some kind of ancient entity. Others say it's a sprawling labyrinth that spreads across space and time and traps unsuspecting civilians in a maze of never-ending terror. Some say it's a metaphor, a mirror into humanity's fascination with long-abandoned structures. Reading this makes me suspicious the realtor has more knowledge than we might suspect on what Old House really is and is trying to trap these unsuspecting civilians like Eve and Charlie. And is it really a sanctuary? Based on how the story goes, it doesn't even seem like the entities want to be there. In my opinion, the old man in the cabin, who we assume is Thomas, doesn't even want to be there. He's trying to find a way out, or that's like how I am interpreting it, at least.
Yeah.
And there's nothing about this place that seems holy or safe to me. It definitely feels more like a selling tactic on the realtor's part to trap more people. It's like the realtors are part of it, you know?
I think you're right. I think probably talk about the realtor in a little bit, but something just feels just a little bit off with them. Mr. Dayton is their realtor, and some of the things he said just were like normal, but also just kind of triggered that this seems something is up with this.
Do you think the realtors might actually be anchors?
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Unless we have like a specific word for an entity that we just don't know yet, anchors makes the most sense because they're definitely, this is bait. This whole article just seems like bait to trap someone into this house. It sounds so perfect. Like I would jump on it if it was a reasonable price, which I'm assuming it was. I just love the imagery in the first paragraph on the document. They just talk about going up a winding road and coming across this beautiful Victorian just waiting for a new tenant. The first time I read it and the subsequent times made it seem more like a carnivorous plant to me, I guess. A very tempting scent that lures in its prey, but carnivorous plants are interesting because many, such as the Oregon's cobra lily, can choose what insects can go inside and which ones can leave.
Right.
Similar to how Charlie seemed to escape while Eve didn't. It's interesting that some believe it to be one thing and others another. When you were talking about some think it's a sanctuary, some think it's a labyrinth. It reminds me of actually an email that we got with a picture of a toy monkey, and the email mentioned that the monkey was called Maxwell by one of the Rare Toys employees and Kilroy by another. And that whole thing with like, it could be one thing, it could be another, reminds me of a different book. It reminds me of the character Hastur from the Cthulhu mythos. Hastur was the king in yellow, but in other stories that Robert Chambers wrote, Hastur was used to represent a place, a person, and actually some stars as well. Maybe similarly, Old House can be different things to different entities or different things depending on your perspective. Eve's house is on a 5-acre lot, and there is that odd number again. It's a Victorian home with 4 beds, 2.5 baths, and 2,700 square feet, not including the unfinished basement. I find it a little funny that it's described as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, considering both that it was the end of Eve's lifetime as Eve, or so we know, and the fact that there is evidence of things repeating in some ways. So it could be that this once-in-a-lifetime event actually has happened multiple times.
Yeah, I agree. In the short story Old House Underwater, there's a monstrous patchwork of Victorian homes, and I feel like this could be maybe their birthplace, because we know that there's more than one old house, right?
Yeah.
And every so often, one of these Victorian homes or another version of Old House gets beyond that line and makes it into the real world. This short story, Old House Underwater, may be the start of this version of Old House that we know with Eve, but it could also be something completely different. We also know that there's other versions, like the Old House Brandon walks by more than once in The Man in the Basement. We also know about the one from Marcus's Morse code left on his IG posts, that absurdly massive Victorian Gothic mansion spanning the entirety of Manor Island, located somewhere in the Southern Pacific. I think, yeah, there's a bunch of different old houses that we already know about just from the short stories and some of the ARG info that we've gotten already.
That's true. I think it's so interesting that Victorian specific style pops up so often. I mean, there are other old houses that we know, like the Maplewood Mall, but Victorian seems to be either he really likes that style, which personally that's also my favorite. Or it could be specific. I love your idea that it's the patchwork of Victorian homes from underwater is like the birthplace. I could just imagine like a house splitting off and then going off to live somewhere.
Yeah. That's like how I imagined it when I was like reading that short story. I was like, oh, it's just throwing its spawns everywhere.
I don't think I'm going to be able to read that again without that imagery, and I love it. The house's description actually ends with the line, "It's a property with the wisdom of old age and the zestful vigor to get with the ever-changing times." And the wisdom of old age just makes me think now of underwater and it moving from that blob of Victorian houses. After reading the book, though, this short sentence is very informative, starting with the obvious, old house is old. There are many iterations of it, and the earliest we know, actually, I had originally thought was the 18th century because of the Belgian explorer Audric Gelshamer, but if I recall correctly, Mr. Dayton said something about it being 300 years old.
Yeah,
I might
that's
talk
right.
about that in a little bit, but I think it's actually the earliest we know of Eve's house is the 17th century.
The more times I read the ever-changing times, the more funny it seems to me. Time in Old House itself is weird and changing. We see this with Eve's experience and how she becomes Emma, and how in the end she seems to end up in a completely different timeline. And who knows what actually happened to her initial life. It reminds me of Skye's reference to the Choose Your Own Adventure books in the last episode. It's almost like there's so many possible outcomes and timelines that can happen. And if you make one decision different, you could just end up in a completely different timeline or a completely different world or a completely different old house. Especially if we tie in the old man telling Eve she's not supposed to be here yet. Things keep changing. And I do still feel like there's repetition in some of these timelines. Like they're reliving it over and over, trying to get it right to finally make the escape. And little slips of memories come out, like how Jenny gets confused about the missing tattoo on Eve's wrist in Family Troubles. I don't know. I could be completely off. It's just where my brain keeps going when I think about this.
I think you're onto something, though, because we know that Eve was following in Allison's footsteps a little bit, and Allison stabbed Thomas 37 times, like I said earlier when I was talking about the numbers, but Eve didn't stab Thomas. Eve stabbed Paige.
Right.
So we don't know if that was a first time or if that was a complete change of the script, essentially. But everything is changing, and that could be why the whole "you're not supposed to be here yet," maybe this time was so far off script that it was making bigger changes than even we know about.
Part of me still thinks Thomas is a good guy. Like he's trying to do the right thing. And maybe, you know, anchors like the realtors keep bringing people in to Old House, such as Allison or even Charlie. And Thomas has to play his role so that he doesn't get killed or something bad doesn't happen to him. But what if he's trying to guide them down the right path to get out successfully? And so he just keeps reliving this over and over and over again, which is why he has the scar.
That makes sense.
Because I still feel like Thomas is a good guy.
Yeah.
And I wonder if he's just trying to guide them.
Like a guide?
Yeah. but like trying to get them out, you know?
I think you're right, because like if this ritual replacement essentially was meant to free not only Allison but Thomas as well, and the old man is Thomas, if he aged to that point, why is he still in Old House if not to try to save other people?
Yeah.
I agree. I don't think Thomas is a bad guy. I also don't think Thomas is the violent host. I am still in the camp of Eve's the violent host, but she just doesn't know it.
I can see that.
It's so and that's something fun with Old House. This is so easy to be reading something like property, which is a real estate listing, and then go off on that connects to
on a tangent. Sorry.
No worries. I'm glad you brought it up because it's really awesome to be able to just like do all these connections like this. Moving on from the house to the property, according to the listing, there is a natural pond in the southwest corner and a waterfall at the north end. And because the listing says that hiking trails extend all over Kettle Creek Mountain, I'm assuming the house is actually on or at the foot of Kettle Creek Mountain itself.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting that most activities the ad mentions are winter excursions. Ice skating, skiing, fall, winter hunting. Is it meant to look for people who would be more active in this area during the time Old House itself is active? I don't know if you've heard of the term snowbirds before, but here in Canada, maybe not like in the Pacific Northwest part of Canada, but there are parts of Canada where it gets really cold and snowy. So a lot of retired couples are called snowbirds because they fly south to warmer climates for the summer or for the winter.
Yeah.
So it's almost as if the realtor is trying to create an appeal and attract people who would enjoy winter activities and stick around and be at Old House when it is most active.
That makes sense. Even the 5 hikers that went missing in a later document were hiking in November.
And there's most likely going to be snow. Like Joffrey Lakes is in BC. It's about maybe a 3-hour drive from Vancouver in the Pemberton area. And by November, it probably has snow.
That's interesting. So not only supposedly does Old House want people-pleasing, easily guided people, but people who are more likely to be around during the winter months.
Yeah, I think so.
I wonder, they don't really talk about if Charlie and Eve have, I guess, hobbies, aside from the photography.
Yeah, not really, no. But they got them with the house flipping.
That's true. It had a little bit of everything in that in this document, didn't it?
Yeah.
Speaking of things to do nearby, the document actually goes from talking about the land itself to the nearby cities, stating that the nearest town, Yale, is just a 30-minute drive away, and Portland, Oregon is only an hour and 45 minutes away. In perfect weather and no traffic, of course. Anyone who has been out around Portland, Oregon, on the outskirts, knows that when traffic exists, very much so in Portland, Oregon. And once you get out of the city, sometimes like the back roads and everything take longer than you think to get into the city itself. The document ends with the statement that the house is ready to be lived in, house inspection pending, but that it was a wonderful opportunity for a creative renovation. Just like you were saying earlier, like
There it is.
That's where it got them.
Again, I think, it's almost like they were creating this ad for a certain type of person, kind of like what we spoke about in our previous episode on Outsiders. Does Old House have a type? I'm curious to know if people who choose to renovate and or flip homes have similar characteristics in general, or similar things Old House would consider weaknesses. I'm sure Old House has become more adaptive over the years and has figured exactly how to trap its prey. And that's more reason for realtors to be anchors, because realtors sell houses. So I feel like they would have insight into how to word an ad to attract the people that Old House wants.
That makes sense. They're the perfect, I don't want to say person, because I'm not 100%, they are people, but
Yeah.
perfect thing to,
Draw
at least
people
most of the
in.
old houses are houses.
Yeah.
It seems
Yep.
like. I want to take a moment and actually connect property and the house to other parts of the book. Talking about realtors, actually, this brings Mr. Dayton to mind, who is Eve and Charlie's realtor. First off, I'm wondering if Dayton is an anagram, because everything is assumed to be an anagram until proven otherwise. And hopefully, I'm wondering if we'll ever get his first name, because playing around with it a little bit, Dayton can be unscrambled into N. Toady. And he is described as short, graying, and with a deep, gravelly voice.
He's also described as seeming to have been plucked from another era. And this isn't the first instance where someone seems like they could be from a different time. So it's interesting.
That's
Mr.
true.
Dayton is interesting.
He is, I was saying a little earlier that there's just something, like everything's, if you read it at face value, seems completely normal, but there's just something a little bit off. And who knows how many realtors there are and when or where they came from. We're talking about them being anchors, and that makes sense to me because, like, I don't know if this anagram is true, but like Toady brings to mind of someone being a follower. And we do know actually that from an email that Skating in a Corner posted, she had shared one of her emails from Seeking Home, and it actually ended with the signature, "Chat soon, Seeking Home agent number 4686.
Right.
Which is a really weird way to end an email like that.
That's a lot of agents, which means that there could be a lot of realtors trying to sell all these different old houses around the world.
Yeah. I don't know of any real life agency like that. I guess technically like some of the bigger name ones, but I don't know if anything like serves the whole world. Also 4,000 agents, and who just numbers their agents like that? No name, just your number 4,686 though.
Reminds me of like secret agents. Secret agent 4,686. And this is an even number, which is different. Yeah, which is different than our trend of odd numbers. So it's suspicious.
I wonder if odd numbers are things in Old House and even numbers are things in real life.
We should keep note of that.
Write that down right now.
Yeah, we should write that down.
We keep a notebook next to us during these sessions because we always come up with things we don't think about. Mr. Dayton mentions also on page 109 that there is only one way in and out of Old House, or not Old House, there's only one way in and out to Eve's house. Literally speaking, it seems that there's only one road that crosses Kettle Creek Bridge, which we know from the document C08 dispatch is Kettle Creek Mountain Highway. On page 129, Mr. Dayton also says that the house has been there for nearly 300 years. And the last note that Mr. Dayton said that kind of stuck out was that Kettle Creek Mountain is also called Stray Dog Summit, which he mentions is a misnomer, and I'm heavily suspicious that that is also an anagram because of that term, misnomer.
Yeah, I agree. I'm also suspicious of there being something hidden in Stray Dog Summit. He also mentions Stray Dog Creek, but says that Stray Dog Creek doesn't have the same ring to it, which is why they stuck to Stray Dog Summit. But it still leads me to believe there may be something there as well. Like we can't rule it out just yet.
Definitely. We'll just add it to the list of things to try with anagrams later.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of other names for things, actually, with all of the above information that we have about the area, the land, Eve's house's description, we actually have a pretty good idea of where exactly Eve lives if her house was in our timeline. I think it's safe to say that at this point that we, not just Sandy and I, but anyone reading, we used to live here or is working on the ARG are parts of the story. In our timeline or world, we don't actually have a confirmed name for that yet. I believe that Kettle Creek Mountain is actually Mount Hood in Northern Oregon, and that Yale is likely the town government camp. This is based off a couple different things. One, if the house was on west of Portland, it would have absolutely mentioned the time it would take to get to the coast, because they would have actually been almost closer to the ocean than they would have been Portland, Oregon, and that would have been an added thing. And Mount Hood is to the east of Portland, and the timing actually works out really, really well. Eve's house is 30 minutes from Yale and an hour and 45 minutes from Portland. This would put her house on the foothills of Mount Hood, I believe, considering the listing mentioned all of the trails around Kettle Creek Mountain that presumably could be accessed from or near her property. We also know that Marcus is a Shining fan by Stephen King based on some of his Instagram stories, one of which had a picture of a keychain from the Overlook Hotel, which was the hotel in the book. Timberline Lodge on Mount Hood is the iconic hotel from that movie. They used the outside shots of Timberline Lodge, even though in the book, I don't remember where the hotel was, but it was in a different state. It wasn't Oregon. And Timberline Lodge actually has one road in and out to government camp, which makes me think of Yale versus Eve's house. But it definitely isn't where Timberline Lodge would be, because that would be too close to Yale. I think her house is on the foothills on the east side of the mountain. If Kettle Creek Highway is equivalent to the Mount Hood Highway, that would be the only way that would take you 30 minutes away from Yale and further away from Portland. Something actually made me laugh when I was obsessively trying to figure out where Eve's house was in the area where I think Eve's house would be. There is an A-frame cabin you can stay in, though that is a little further away than 30 minutes from government camp, which I think is the equivalent to Yale. And in that area, there is also a Heather Creek and a Newton Creek. And I'm like, was that where the names came from? It's probably just a funny coincidence.
Could be. Well, you know how, for anybody that's a Harry Potter fan, isn't it a fact, I guess, that J.K. Rowling got her names for the characters from a graveyard in Scotland?
I never knew that.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been to the graveyard. I would love to go, I guess, because it's Harry Potter. I love everything Harry Potter, but it might be that, while they were doing their research, this is where they gathered their names from. So it could be a funny coincidence, or he grabbed them from there while he was doing research.
That's a good point. I didn't look at every single creek name, but now I kind of want to go back and see what I can find. Mm-hmm. Huh. That's actually all I have for the property document and my obsessive trying to find where it is in real life. And now I want to bring us back.
Great job, by the way.
Thank you for validating my obsessive rabbit hole diving. I'm going to just bring us back to the beginning of all of this, where I skipped over the website seekinghome.net. So the book does, quote, is no longer operational, but this is actually a real website that you can access. And this was the first clue we were all given that the book is only a part of a bigger mystery. And with that, we're going to transition into talking about the alternate reality game that's going on. And for those of you who don't know what that means, what is an alternate reality game? And I'm going to read the description from argn.com, which, if anyone is looking to learn more about ARGs, I highly, highly recommend that website. Alternate reality games are fictional narratives that unfold over time, using the real world as a platform to tell a story that gives players control, or the illusion of control, over the events that unfold. Some ARGs may ask you to follow narrative threads from one platform to another. If you see a business card while watching a YouTube video, check to see if the company has an online presence, or try calling the telephone number. Players typically work together to piece together bits and scraps of information to uncover larger stories, acting like narrative archaeologists. Often the community of players that form around these games can help point you in the right direction. Other ARGs focus more on the puzzles or challenges for the community to tackle. Is an audio file corrupted with static noises? This sound might be hiding a clue. Puzzles come in every shape and form, and while there are resources to help with common ciphers, you will frequently need to get more creative to tackle the kind of puzzles used in ARGs. Often these puzzles are explicitly designed to require large groups of people working together to solve. And it's actually kind of funny that it says you can use online sources to solve things, but sometimes they're a little bit harder, because that is exactly what happened with the first puzzle that I found.
The definition actually reminds me of the business card Thomas gave Even Outsiders that we were talking about last episode, because it mentions, if you see a business card while watching a YouTube video, check to see if the company has an online presence. I think you're right. I think maybe something will come of that business card, but who knows? I
did, when I read that, because at this point, when I first read the book, I had solved all of the Morse code. And so at that point, I was like hyper focusing on catching stuff like that. Voss Photolab is not a website or an Instagram yet, but I can absolutely see that happening later.
Me too.
I think actually that if we look at the definition of an ARG, that the We Used to Live Here ARG is a mix of following narrative threads from one place to another, as well as solving puzzles, which is really awesome.
And there are actually 3 websites mentioned in the book that are real and we can go to. They're functional and totally related to the book. The first is www.seeking-home.net, mentioned at the beginning of this document, which Skye has already mentioned. It hasn't been updated since October 2024, and there were minor updates according to the welcome page. However, this website seems to be the main domain used for other things happening within the ARG, including the welcome page with a list of all the websites. We've actually linked this website in all of our descriptions, so please feel free to go to it, and we'll get to the other ones later. The second is www.rare.toy.forums.net, mentioned in the document B13 symbols. And the third is www.high-strangeness-forums.net, mentioned at the end of the book in document E25 help. My gosh, those websites are a mouthful to say out loud.
They really are, especially with all of the dashes.
Yeah, I keep wanting to say dot.
I do appreciate the fact that they are very similar looking as far as how they're written out, and they're all .nets as well. So it's easier to identify what is a website related to this ARG versus a website that isn't, because it's really easy to find something that may look like it is, but it actually is not related at all.
Yeah.
And that's always hard because ARGs encourage you to call and email and interact with these things. And if you get something wrong, then you're just talking to someone who does not know what you're talking about, and most likely in creepy contexts.
Yeah.
So 3 websites, real websites, and actually even one valid email address, which is also in document hoax. These websites existed when the book was created, which is kind of cool because I'm sure a lot of people who read it on the first day it came out probably did look it up. So I'm glad that they had them ready to go. There wasn't much you could do with them, however, but they planted that seed. The question of, if these websites are real, what else in this book is real? The valid email in the book was the oldhousearchivist@gmail.com email. And yeah, I was a bit afraid to email this at first because in the first ARG I had participated in, I don't remember the exact circumstances around this, but I know that we got an email wrong and we all mass spammed something like, "We are here," or equally creepy, and probably freaked this person out getting like hundreds of emails from random emails.
Who are you?
So I did not email the archivist email right away because I was so worried of having a repeat of that.
Did you ever get a response from them, or did they just ignore all of you?
We did. I don't think we did, but we did end up emailing an apology at some point, being like, "We don't know if you've seen these, but this is what's going on, and we're so sorry. You'll never get an email again."
That's so funny.
So I always have that in the back of my mind. It was a good lesson that even though it encourages you to interact, always just like at least double check and make sure that it is actually part of the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
But thankfully others didn't have the same hesitation that I did and were emailing questions and comments to that email because that kickstarted the whole thing essentially.
Yeah.
And even though nobody was getting response for the first month or so. I will talk about the state of the websites at the beginning in just a second, but I want to fast forward from the publishing of the book on June 18th to July 15th, when the Reddit was created, because the Reddit ties into the websites and the start of the chaos of the ARG. Once the Reddit was created, it became this central communication hub where everyone could talk about theories and share progress on any of the puzzles that we encountered, and just share the different bits and pieces that we were all getting. I didn't find the Reddit actually until a couple weeks after it was created, late July, but I think I was one of the first handful to post. But how did you find the Reddit page?
I think you were, actually, when I was looking back on it. I think I found it later in August after we read it for book club. And honestly, I don't even remember how I found it. I know I was Googling things related to the book and Old House, and then the OHA subreddit came up with a thread already talking about something that I was interested in. And then I remember being so excited about it, and my boyfriend was laughing at me because I spent the whole day, I think it was a Sunday or a Saturday, it was a weekend, and I spent the entire day from the time that we woke up to the time that we went to sleep on this book. And he was in disbelief because he was like doing things, and he'd come back and he's like, you're still like obsessed with this book. And I was like, yeah, oh my God. And then I'm trying to share everything I found with him, and he's just laughing, like, he's just like, oh my God, Sandy.
I did the same thing. I was reading it, and when I went to work, I was like, I'm going to info dump all of this stuff that you don't want to know onto my coworkers. They're like, that's cool, sure.
Yeah.
And the Reddit is just a place where not only could we share our enthusiasm, which is awesome because some people in real life may not have the same enthusiastic chaos that we have with this book, but the Reddit definitely has similar people.
Yeah, and that's great. It's great to find a space where similar minds and interests can connect.
Yeah, I love Reddit for that reason.
Yeah.
Not only do we have like-minded people to talk to, but we also had the Eye of the Archivist on us, the so-called old House Archivist from the book. And this is the start of things from the book seeping into real life. But let's take a look at those 3 websites. Seeking Home did not have all that much aside from a black page with text saying a new website was coming soon, and that actually hasn't changed at all. But we learned later that Seeking Home has much deeper than first appears. And we'll talk about that a little later in this timeline because it comes into play much, much later than at the time of release. When the book was released, the other website, Strangeness, also had little to offer, but way more than Seeking Home. The only functioning pages were the main one, which was simple with no text, basically just saying, Hi Strangeness website, a place where we talk about strange things. The personal experience page, which was the same, and a broken login page. Everything else just showed a please come back later message. Something that was interesting was on the login page, however, at the bottom were 2 phone numbers listed, one for the US and one for Canada. Both played the same static-filled, slowed-down Morse message code when you called it. I downloaded an app that had a free trial to record phone calls, and I recorded that because there was no way I was going to keep calling this number over and over again.
Yeah.
If anyone looked up my phone history, that would have been weird. I posted that actually on the Reddit, and if you scroll back far enough, it's still up.
Yes.
And I have to hand it to whoever created this message because you did an amazing job with it. I am very bad at Morse code, and so I took the recording to the codes subreddit as well as a couple of puzzle solving discords and would post it, and it was like, hey, can someone help me with this because I really, really suck at Morse code. And everyone I talked to just put the audio file into an online Morse code translator, and when they put it into that translator, it just spits out gibberish letters. I was sure, though, that there was more to this than just random letters because it was very clearly Morse, even if it was distorted. Yeah. So I actually used my recording, and I apologize if this wasn't how you're supposed to solve it, but I took that audio and I put it into a program to create a spectrogram of the audio so I could see where the beeps and dashes were and manually decoded the Morse from the visual of it.
That's brilliant. That's a great idea.
Thank you. I'm much more of a visual learner than I am an audio learner. Once decoded, the Morse code said, you live in a red sun overworld. Though we never actually got confirmation if that answer was correct, the numbers vanished shortly after we posted our findings, which felt like a confirmation to me. The phrase also appears in the book a couple times. We also have emails about it. Louis Rue, which is the name from the book, posted about it on his Instagram. And the most recent mention of that phrase was actually on December 1st, where Marcus commented the phrase in Morse code on his Instagram post.
There's something definitely going on with that. I feel like it's been mentioned more and more. I wonder if the next part of this ARG has something to do with that. potentially.
I hope so. I have been waiting for this to become more of a thing since the phone calls, because I spent so long on those phone calls, and that is the only Morse code message that I can like look at now and be like, that's what this says. Because
You've memorized it, you know, by heart.
yes. So that was pretty much it for what High Strangeness had to offer, but it had our first puzzle, the Morse code, which is really, really awesome. Now, my favorite website is the rare.toy.forums.net. It's mostly the same now as it was from when the book was published, except for the email at the bottom of the website changed a month or two in. Originally, the email was fake, and it bounced back any messages sent. The only working link on the page was the board games, puzzles, and card games, which leads to a creepy page repeating "they're watching you" over and over and over.
And it's in red.
And it's in red on black background.
Yeah.
Hidden in the source code of actually that website was a message attached to the welcome banner, and it read, "Please help me. I need you to follow the instructions carefully. Email the address at the bottom of the site and ask them to write you back as soon as possible. If they do, tell them to come and get me. Please, I can't bear another second here. Please, for the love of God, help me." And as I mentioned earlier, the email on Rare Toys was initially invalid. And so I think I know other people too, started an emailing spree, flooding every available email address that we had. Like the High Strangeness had one, the Old House Archivist one. We started flooding everything with this message. And very, very quickly, a valid email popped up on the Rare Toy website, which is rare.toy.forums@gmail.com. And we managed to finally get the message through to the intended recipient, whoever that was. We actually still don't know that. The Redditors and other people emailing Rare Toys, we need a group name, because not all of the puzzle solvers are Redditors. The conspiracists.
We've been talking about this, and we're like, what do we call everyone involved in this subreddit? And I was thinking about it, and I thought, what about guests? The definition of a guest is a person who's been trapped or willfully residing for less than 1 year in Old House. A tourist is someone who spends less than a week inside, so we're all definitely past that. But we are under a year, considering the book just came out in June. So at this point, most of y'all are guests in Old House, whether you like it or not. So I think guests is a good name.
I like that idea. I really like that, because we're definitely willingly residing in here as well.
Yeah.
All right, the guests. I like that. Okay, so the guests emailing Rare Toys was actually what started what I'm going to call the first arc of the ARG, which I'll also say officially started in August. That's when we solved the Morse from the website and some other stuff happened. So after the guests began flooding Rare Toys with emails, we started getting emails back, actually. This is the first time we started getting responses from what we've been trying to interact with. And the first thing was from someone from Rare Toys named Todd York. He claimed to have absolutely no idea what we were talking about and mentioned they were trying to bring the website back up. His emails also included cryptic messages hidden in them, at least at the beginning, like randomly incorrect capitalized letters spelling out old gods. Shortly after the hidden message was confirmed to have been received by Todd York, even if that wasn't the intended recipient, the hidden message in the website source code changed to, "Thank you for emailing. They want me to tell you that I am okay. There is no need to worry about me anymore. I'm perfectly fine. Don't worry. I'm okay. Don't worry at all." And that message is still up as of December 16th. But things actually didn't stop there. Once the ball was rolling, it just went. As more people emailed, we actually started receiving pictures back with nearly every response. The file names of these pictures contained Morse code, which we started to track. And then, forgive me if I forget, but the emails I think started coming in September, not just from Rare Toys actually, but from Old House Archivist, High Strangeness, and most recently the Seeking Home website. And they all came with not only those pictures, but information such as my favorite phrase, you live in a red sun overworld.
Yeah.
So the emails started coming back in September, not just from Rare Toys, but from Old House Archivist, the High Strangeness website, and actually most recently Seeking Home as well. The emails came with the photos, but also just bits of information like, you live in a red sun overworld is a phrase most commonly associated with Old House. Mm-hmm. As we sifted through these pictures, though, we discovered hidden messages, either embedded in the photos or just hidden inside the photos themselves. Mm-hmm. Probably far later than the puzzle creators intended, but we got there in the end. And actually, here's where I'm going to give the floor to Sandy, because without her, neither the Morse nor the hidden messages would have been nearly as organized or put together as they were.
Oh, man. Well, thank you, Skye, for finding the first photo with the hidden message in it. After that, it was a hunt for me to find the message in every photo. And honestly, we missed a bunch of them to begin with. Like, I remember looking at them and I was like, oh, this photo doesn't have one. This photo doesn't have one. Oh, this has one. But then at some point, we realized that every photo had it. And we were like, I was scrambling to go back and check every single photo that showed up on the subreddit and every email that came to me. And I also have to say that the guests worked so hard on this as well, and it was a major team effort, and it was great. I loved it. So thank you to everyone who contributed to that. And unfortunately, we still don't have the full message. We're missing one photo. Guys, if you're going to email, I keep emailing and asking for this photo, but I'm not getting a response. Email and ask for photo 14C. That's the only one we're missing.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm not 100% sure if there's anything after the last photo, which is 26J. It just is redacted. So it may end there. I'm not sure if there's something else. So in the interest of time, and because we don't have the full message, I won't go over that message right now, but maybe we'll do it in a bonus episode.
I think that's a good idea. It is very, very long. Also, it was great that once you started finding the hidden messages, which, guys, we cannot overstate the fact that these bits of line of sentences, you had to zoom in very, very far, and they were just like one shade off of whatever background they were on.
Yeah.
And you had to pixel hunt to find these messages sometimes, and it took a long time. But I love that once we did start finding and posting on the Reddit, hey, oh my gosh, everybody check your emails again, because there are hidden messages that anyone who did get an email, or most people, went and double checked and posted what they found.
Yep.
And we started this like train of Reddit posts about the emails.
That actually reminds me, I think those two photos that have Morse code hidden in it, but they're the colors, and it's so small that I can't tell the Morse code from the pixels.
That's
and
true.
So I don't think we've ever figured those out. Those are still pending puzzles.
We should repost those, because I think we posted them in September or maybe early October. But yeah, those are the two that started the biologist photos, and they
were difficult.
Very blurry. I think they switched to Morse because we had caught on to the hidden messages at that point, and they just needed to make it just a touch difficult.
But it's hard when the Morse code dots and dashes are the same size as the pixels. And so I can't tell the difference.
Yeah, I've gone over those too, and like some letters are okay, but others, and we even did, because someone, I don't remember who, but someone got emailed this photo, and when they posted it to the Reddit, because they were either just taking a screenshot of the photo from their email, it further compressed this photo, and the Morse was like straight up not readable. And I think you emailed the archivist about, please send us the original of this photo.
Yes, I did. And I think we got it, right?
Yeah.
But it was still difficult. It's still challenging.
I kind of wish, like you said, that the dots are 1 pixel big. Either it was just a little bit of more of a color contrast, or it was 4 pixels to make a square for a dot.
So it was a bit more clear.
Yeah, but it's keeping us occupied. After the photos, when we finally started getting in the groove of that, actually, the High Strangeness website finally updated. And I want to give a shout out to Redditor I apologize if this is not actually how you pronounce this, Apedosmill, for finding out that the login page was now working. To get into the hidden page, all you had to do was type anything in both the username and password boxes 3 times. For the 4th time, led you to a new page. And the way you knew something was happening was in the URL, as you were trying to submit random username and passwords, it said attempt 1, attempt 2, final attempt. And then it led you to the page. And I love that you caught on because I had given up on that at that point of trying to figure that out. And that's the spirit of working together. That new page actually seemed to have nothing on it but just black. However, if you hit Control and A, it highlighted everything on a page, and 3 things actually were hidden. The text was black, so it just blended into the black background. The first was a lowercase a with a circumflex, or that little triangle above letters sometimes, a square, and a capital A. The second was a plus sign with the word at, and in parentheses the word the. And the last was an underscore symbol with the letters SPC next to it, indicating space. The website had other new pages as well, as like a frequently asked questions page, a rules page, a general discussion page, and some of these pages actually also contained either short cryptic messages or little hidden things like the ones in the login page. For example, at the bottom of the rules page, there was a backslash and / together to create like a V and the word descend next to it. And in a little bit, we'll explain what that meant.
The About Us page actually also had 4 codes as well. And so at this point, we were catching on that it was a key to the messages in Hoax, but we just didn't have everything yet.
And not having everything yet actually kind of led us to the next website that we stumbled across was the wiki that's maintained by the Old House Archivist. And I found this way earlier than I posted it on the Reddit actually, because I wasn't sure. There wasn't much on it when I found it. Like there was just a couple of words. So I didn't think I was supposed to find it yet, because that actually has happened. I found stuff I wasn't supposed to find, including a website that you can no longer find via Google, which I'm not going to say because I still don't think it's supposed to be there. So this wiki was created. Eventually I posted about it after like asking if it was okay to the mods for me to share that. I was very much more hesitant in the beginning of this ARG about sharing information with the Reddit until I was like, okay, I'm kind of more confident about this now. The wiki actually became our main source of verified Old House information, and it is invaluable because while the Reddit is amazing for communicating and collaborating with everyone, it is, as you can see with us like frantically looking through past posts, it can be difficult to find information sometimes. Yeah. The wiki was updated in September, and at first it only had 2 photos, but by October 12th, the OHA uploaded most of the photos, allowing us to piece together the messages to compile that long hidden passage we were talking about. Currently, most of them have been put together. We're missing just a couple, and the same goes for the Morse code in the file names. We were able to get all of those as well. Finally, Seeking Home after that was sort of updated, and I say sort of because the main page is still the same. But some of us were emailed a new webpage actually called seeking-home.net/welcome. And this page listed all the Old House confirmed websites currently active, and thankfully when they were last updated, because that information was hidden in the source code and I could not find it. As well as links to everything, which is really nice because I've had a couple DMs with people starting out asking what they can do. It's easy to be like, here's a welcome page with everything, all the different websites. And that actually wasn't the only thing that Seeking Home was hiding. That actually brings me to the climax of the arc. The chaotic night that Sandy and I found ourselves up at 11 p.m. and freaking out. So on October 19th it wasn't 11 p.m., but it was 10, I had to go double check, 10:04 p.m. was when I received this email. And Sandy and I had been talking earlier that evening about just, as always, anything relating to Old House. And Sandy had just gone to bed, and I was still up because sleep doesn't exist. Not only did I receive this email, but other guests did as well. The email included a link to a secret page on Seeking Home, and the minute I got to this page, I was frantically spamming Sandy, and I was just like, you need to wake up and look at this. So the page was completely black, as most of the pages are, and there was green text. It kind of looked like, you know, in movies where someone is hacking something, there's the black screen and green code. It reminded me of that. All there was the word no, and then 5 underscore lines, as well as the blinking cursor indicating that we needed to type something. And I'll let Sandy tell you about this, because without her, we would not have been able to catch on as quickly to how to solve this part, or the fact that it was related to something else we had solved.
Well, thank you, but I may have done the record keeping, but it wouldn't have been possible without everyone uploading their photos and the emails we received, and constantly checking the Old House wiki for updates. So I posted our progress online just to kind of give everyone a visual. And actually, Tainted Crimson was the one to put it together without having all of the codes. And they recognized the quote from Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House, and that was, "No live organism can continue for long to exist sanely under conditions of absolute reality." And that's what actually unlocked the key. And we'll post a link to that website actually in the description so you guys can play around with it yourself. But honestly, it was the help of everybody that was trying to get those emails or send those emails and get the photos and put them on the Reddit, and I just was the one to organize them, and then Tainted Crimson was actually the one to pull through and be like, hey, it's actually this quote, so thank you.
And because of that, it was a fill in the blank, essentially. So it said no, we filled in a couple of words, and if you did too many, it wouldn't let you in. You had to like type very slowly, so the minute you hit what it thought is the end word, it went to a different page where you had to fill in a little bit more of the quote, and eventually got through the whole quote, and it brought you to a new page where there was a bunch of symbols and letters and words, and we noticed that a lot of the symbols were the exact same symbols that were hidden throughout the High Strangeness website, such as the A with the circumflex equals the letter A. We didn't have a code like that, though. We had a code key, but no code to solve with it. Just the random ones from the website, but it didn't make a code. However, remember earlier when I was talking about the description of an ARG, and that one of the points was often these puzzles are explicitly designed to require large groups of people working together to solve. Sandy and I made the decision to share what we had found with the rest of the guests on Reddit, because we were like, we can't keep this to ourselves. We need everybody to know about this. And that actually was the right thing to do, because once we posted that, or we just were not figuring it out fast enough, which is also valid. Because on that post, a user named Only Says Monkey commented, and yes, that is the Only Says Monkey username from the document symbols. So they commented and told us to go back to the website with the unfamiliar code key, except this time it was different.
And what's funny about that is like the first key that we got on the website, Skye and I totally saw something different. So when Monkey put that code on there, we were like both trying to figure it out. And I'm on my phone because I'm in bed. I'm supposed to be sleeping because I work the next morning. And Skye's on her laptop. And I'm like, we're like taking screenshots and sending it to each other. And I noticed we had different, like it looked different for both of us. And so I'm like, wait, this is why it's not making sense. So we actually put it together and we figured it out. But it was such chaos. We were like, oh my God. And we were so frantic. We're like, oh my God, we have to figure this out. There was just so much excitement. And there's no way I was sleeping after that.
Lesson learned, do not do these things at midnight.
Well, please don't send emails, OHA, at 10 o'clock p.m. Please send them in the afternoon. Oh my goodness. Anyway, we ended up figuring out what Monkey was saying, and it was to go back to the website. But even then, we were like, okay, so we went back to the High Strangeness website. We went back to Seeking Home. We went back to the wiki, and we're like, nothing's changing. What website are you talking about? And then Monkey responds with the link to the website that they had sent us in the email. And so we're like, oh my God, there it is. And then we noticed that it changed to what it is today, when you go to that website. And that is the key to the 3 ciphers in Hoax. So that was fun. And so of the 3 codes, we figured out the last 2 first because they were the easiest to figure out. The second code that is on page 152 translates into a red tree, take 10 paces left, then round boulder, 3, go back to red tree, knock 2, go back to boulder, underground hatch. And the third one, which is on page 154, translate to at underground hatch, descend, take cross pose 5 seconds, avoid violent host, take 30 paces forward, wait 3 days. It's kind of funny because it's choppy, but it makes sense now because you think of, I forget which chapter it was in, but it was when, I think it was during Getaway maybe, when Eve had left the motel and was scrambling back to Old House to get the real Charlie that she thought was there. And that little girl does the cross pose in the road.
That's right.
It's these same rituals that are in these codes, so.
This one in particular, too, I don't remember if this was the Old Friends chapter or the one before Old Friends, but this whole scenario was acted out by the same navy green boots, white t-shirt person. Where they disappeared behind a boulder. And it seemed very specific because I think Eve mentioned something along the lines of they were acting erratically or like doing very specific robotic movements. And then they disappeared behind a boulder. Eve followed and they were gone.
Yeah, very interesting.
I think we'll find more instructions like this as we go along too, because it reminded me a lot of the stuff in the cabin. Like, this exit leads to the Red Sun overworld. I think that these are ins and outs of Old House directions.
I agree.
So after Sandy solved those 2, Sandy smartly went to bed at that point. And the first code, the one with the glyphs, so we solved it also that night, but it didn't make sense. It spelled out NHU _ A, and the A had a little circle over it. M _ ENTIRVIE _ NIN, which made no sense. And honestly, this took me an embarrassingly long time to solve because it was like 1 a.m. at this point, and I was so stuck on it being a Caesar cipher mentally that I ignored Occam's razor and thought that they were the right letters, just like completely shifted. And I had all of these ideas in my head, which were not right. And I finally figured out that, anagrams are a thing that is very common in all of this, that they were the right letters. They were just in the wrong order. I don't want to embarrass myself too much about this, but like at the beginning, when I read the book, I have an entire sketchbook that is gridded out and had the few letters that we knew from the partial code key in map, having different guesses in English, in Italian, and Norwegian, because those were the 3 languages mentioned in Hoax. Because of that, I had a whole rabbit hole falling into the basics of Norwegian, and that's how I realized that the A with the circle over it is prevalent in Scandinavian languages, and the only Scandinavian language that we have any regular connection with was Norwegian, actually, because it comes up a lot in the book. From there, it was easy. It should have been solved that night, and it was not solved till the next day. I quickly was able to figure out, AM was actually MA, NIN had to be INN, and eventually I ended up with, I am so sorry, I'm going to butcher this, Hunma invitere in, which translates to she must invite them in. And thank you to Redditor Alama Liminimi for confirming that. I also apologize if I mispronounced your name.
This actually goes back to our last episode on how it all starts. It makes sense, right? She must invite them in. And I think this was such a key moment when we were able to uncover what this message said, because it just, it made things make more sense. And in this instance, Eve is that person that lets Thomas and his family in.
And that wraps up what I would say is the first arc of the ARG. We finally solved the codes from the book. That has been the biggest question mark for anyone who's read the book, honestly. And finally, we've been having some hints as to what the next arc will be. Some people are being emailed pages from a journal of someone studying the land around Old House. Like someone got a picture of a leaf that's from a hellebore plant. And they all seem to be talking about the plants and animals within the 5-kilometer Old House radius. Marcus has also shown Instagram stories of him filming out in the woods and hinted that was related to Old House. And there's a break right now, and that's confirmed in November, which makes sense because film is way different than anything else we've had, and that takes time to edit.
Yeah.
But even though nothing big happened in November, we did get a major confirmation. Something we've theorized before was that the third week of the month is important somehow, because let's just break down some things that have happened. June 18th, We Used to Live Here was published, third week of June. July 15th, the Reddit was created, third week of July. August, I do not actually remember if anything happened at this point. September, a comment actually from the mod on the Reddit says the first big document release, which I think means the first major update to the wiki, was on Friday the 13th of September, which is the Friday before the third week, but come on, you can't really pass up Friday the 13th. But on September 15th, which was the Monday, the third week of September, a wave of photos and their subsequent hidden messages were posted to the wiki. October 19th, the Saturday of the third week of October, was when the book codes were solved.
Yes.
And November 22nd, the Friday of the third week, the Old House Archivist mod on Reddit confirmed that the third week of the month was important and informed us that we would not be finding anything new online in November because of a fire in the Old House Archivist facilities, which I'm counting as an update because now the fires from the book are impacting our perception of the world in real time. And I think that is huge. We are now in the third week of December, and actually, funny enough, right before we started recording this, I got an email. And
That's true.
because we hadn't had anything in December yet, and I was unsure if we would, because it's totally understandable if they needed another month to do all this. But I got an email, and it was different than the other emails we've gotten. I did not get a picture, but the response was ciphered in ROT13 cipher, ROT13. And it had an excerpt from the upcoming book, The Caretaker. So I think we might be seeing some more emails this week, and maybe we'll get something else.
I think
and this
so.
won't
It's
age
about
well
that
because
time.
it'll be after the third week when it's published.
I know. We are recording our episodes in advance because we are slow to this new process. So bear with us. Some of the stuff might be outdated by the time these episodes come out. But for all live updates, please refer back to the subreddit.
Yes. So now that we've kind of caught you up to what's been going on with the ARG, you might be asking how you can get involved, and we encourage you to email the available emails with any comments or questions that you have. I often send very, very long theories to them, which they sometimes answer, and they sometimes probably think, what are you doing? Come to the Reddit, toss some theories around. There's also the hidden enneagrams in the book that are still unsolved. There's the hidden Morse code that we should repost that is still unsolved.
Yep.
And I think that is the only concrete thing we have to work on right now. But as we said, that could change at any moment. So don't forget, this is all happening in real time, and these things take time. Plus, this keeps us hooked with breaking down every line of the book for deeper meaning.
Yeah, absolutely. And in each of our episode descriptions, there is a link to the websites, there is a link to the emails, and if you click on those links, it will open up your mail app with that email, and so you can just start your email from there. And there's also a link to all the Instagrams involved with the ARG and all of the Reddit accounts that are also related to the ARG. And our goal moving forward is to hopefully make mini bonus episodes in between our regular scheduled bi-weekly releases. And with these episodes, we'd like to provide a more real-time update on what's happening with the ARG. But honestly, no promises. Only being a weekly drop in episodes with full-time jobs and life can be a little bit challenging. However, if it is within our capacity, then we would really, really love for that goal to come to life. So watch out for those.
And if we do any other updates, they will not be as long as this one.
Yeah, this is long because we're going over the whole ARG, but we thought it was very fitting with the introduction to the first website and property. So I hope you had as much fun listening to this as we have had fun explaining it, but also living it.
Reliving it.
Yeah.
All right, so that's all the time. Actually, we're probably way past time. That's all the time we have for today. So, as always, we're your guides, Sandy and Skye, and we will see you next time, tourists.
And guests. See ya.
And guests. And I apologize, I cannot remember who first pointed that fact out.
I think it was you.
I didn't find it first, for sure.
The hidden message in the photo?
But I wonder if someone sent that to me in a chat that didn't post it. I don't think it was me. It's just... No, it was you that found it.
I didn't find it.